In this lecture, we're going to begin our introduction of a very important component of the scientific literature, and that is called the systematic review. Now, the systematic review is one type of a broader class of published literature, and that is called the literature review. And the literature review is a published document that collects and assembles, synthesizes and analyzes, and on occasion will critique a body of literature on a particular topic. And the purpose of this one published document is to bring together a number of other published documents, or rather the outcomes of those published documents, to help make sense of a very large body of evidence. And this one published document we call the literature review creates a convenience for readers who may not have the time or resources to read dozens and dozens of individual research reports, but can rather read one research report called the literature review that will bring together many outcomes of numerous studies. So the purpose of conducting this literature review is to synthesize and present the overall and existing state of knowledge on a topic. And rather than just reiterating a number of outcomes of numerous research studies, the literature review, in assessing all of that information, will generate a conclusion regarding the state of that particular field of study. It examines if there are any unique patterns that exist in a particular topic within the scientific literature. So on one topic there may be dozens and dozens of individual research studies, but are there any unique patterns that emerge in the outcomes of those research studies? The literature review will bring those together and begin the process of identifying those such patterns. And that is really the first step before moving on to the third bullet item here of establishing any unique implications in that particular field of study. Are there any unique applications that result from the analysis from all of these research studies? That is the first and primary function of the literature review. The second function of the literature review, it is actually a required process, and so in many academic programs, such as graduate level programs carrying out a master's degree or some other type of graduate degree, it is often a requirement to conduct a thesis. An important component of the thesis is to analyze the current state of knowledge of a particular topic, and that is what the literature review is. If one is not earning a graduate degree but is engaged in research, it is actually a requirement of that research. And that allows the researchers, before taking on a particular project, because a project will require a significant amount of time, effort, and resources, it allows the researchers to gain an understanding of what currently exists. What's the current base of knowledge for their particular research project? And in turn, this will inform the researchers of that particular state of their field of study, and that will help to guide a more efficient and more productive research project moving forward. Conducting a literature review does come with some cautions, and the first caution has to do with the actual review of the entire body of knowledge that can be assembled by the researcher. Depending upon the field of study, a very large body of original research papers does exist. So it's very important that the researchers here, the person preparing the literature review, will understand that not all of those original research papers will be particularly relevant to their literature review, But that conclusion, that determination, can only be made if those original research papers are initially explored. So the initial stage here in reviewing the literature, it's a very important stage, and it's the cautionary note here is that researchers just don't blindly put every research paper that they find into the literature review, because the literature review may lose focus if that happens. The second caution is what's called vote counting, and vote counting should be avoided with respect to basing conclusions of the literature review on vote counting. And vote counting applies specifically to original research studies that are quantitative in nature. So original research studies that base those conclusions on the outcome of a statistical type of analysis. And in that regard, there are generally three possible outcomes: positive, negative, or no relationship. And those conclusions in the individual research studies, the original research studies, are based on achieving an arbitrary decision called statistical significance. And so it's very important that researchers pay heed to not basing the literature review conclusions just solely on counting how many studies were positive, how many were negative, and how many had no relationship. That is an important part of conducting the literature review research, but the outcomes of those studies should be interpreted in a broader context as well. The finding of statistical significance is actually a very simplistic interpretation, and that's the caution with vote counting, because statistical significance in one research study is affected by the sample size, how many research participants were in that original study, what was the effect size, and the effect size is something that we'll define in this particular unit, but generally the effect size relates to the magnitude of the outcome generated by some type of experimental intervention. And the actual research design itself in the original research study will also impact statistical significance. So then we come to the question as to the original research study. And the original research study is considered a primary source of new information. And this new information relates to information that did not exist before this individual research study was carried out. Therefore, it is considered to be a primary study or a primary source of new information. And this is generated from an individual experiment or a research study that collected novel information. Once again here, the term novel relates to the fact that this information did not exist before this study was carried out. And we use the term information and data interchangeably. Data is a more specific term that refers to numerical values, implying that these are quantitative and statistical based research studies. Now, how was this information obtained in the original study? Well, these are obtained from various laboratory procedures, the administration of surveys to various groups of individuals, questionnaires, and as well as other research tools that will take that information, put a numerical value to those different pieces of information, and then the researchers will arrive at some conclusion. And so we're looking at individual people or databases where original data were collected but were never analyzed. What we're looking at here at the bottom of the slide is excerpts from a research study published in 2003 in the European Journal of Nutrition. And in this research study, the researchers were interested in the bioavailability of beta carotene. Now, one of the foods that provides beta carotene are carrots. And what the researchers were interested in is how, or relates to the manner in which those carrots are consumed by individuals. And so what distinguishes this particular study from other types of published reports is that this is an original research study. When we go to the methodology of this paper and we examine the subheading under volunteers, we see in this research study there were 8 human volunteers that are characterized by this age range that volunteered to participate in this study, and you'll see a range of other characteristics of these 8 individuals as well as inclusion and exclusion criteria. So prior to this study being conducted, this information did not exist for this particular research question. And this information is depicted on the right hand side of the slide in this figure here taken from this research paper. So this figure demonstrates the degree of absorption of beta carotene, which is a phytochemical. It's a particular type of nutrient in carrots, and the degree to which that was absorbed from the digestive system and into the cardiovascular system among these 8 volunteers as a function of carrot preparation method. And so the circle symbols indicate the degree of absorption for carrots that were not processed whatsoever for consumed raw, and the squares indicate carrots that were cooked and pureed. And the results here indicate, as a function of time following consumption, the 8 individuals experienced a greater degree of absorption of beta carotene when the carrots were consumed in a cooked and pureed manner rather than carrots that were consumed raw. So what we're looking at here once again here is that this is information that did not exist prior to conducting the study, and this is an original study because this was information drawn from 8 volunteers. So this ends our initial lecture on the systematic review.